Amir, it has been way, way, way too long, but I'm glad that we didn't talk about this film, Young Ali, or Those Were the Days, when it first came out because I wasn't quite ready for it.
Hmm.
It is a pandemic era movie, and it's about a guy who's lost his job during this like terrible world's gone crazy scenario, and his life is spiraling out of control. And when you first approached me about this movie, as is the case most of the time, I was crazy busy and non-responsive and completely unprofessional. But I finally caught up with it um, when my life is kind of spiraling out of control. I've been out of work for 6 months. The world has not gotten less crazy in the 5 years since COVID hit, and it felt in a way as if while you and Charles Borg were working on this picture, you had somehow transported yourself into the future and invaded my mind, John Malkovich style, to completely capture what I've been going through. And I don't know if other people are experiencing this kind of mania in these weird, trying times, but this is definitely a picture of the moment. And I'm grateful that you reached out to me. And we're also very patient with contacting me and saying, hey, do you want to watch this movie or not? And I finally did. And I'm glad because I love this movie.
Hmm. Thank you so much. I appreciate that very much. I'm glad I kept tinging you occasionally. Um, mostly because I think these types of works uh, definitely don't get the type of attention other works do. But yeah, I mean, it comes around. I think I always feel like everything comes around at the right time.
Well, and that's again, I'm. It's kind of weird for I guess folks to be watching this because they're probably thinking, well, that's your experience. What does that have to do with me? But there is something. It feels universal, or at least universal enough to a large enough group of people that
Mm.
this movie can resonate. Because whether or not you are working or having to move back in with your parents, or struggling with the job market, or just the general sense of what does all of this mean in an era of artificial intelligence kind of taking or threatening to take jobs away from creative people or just like regular workaday people through automation. It just seems like there's a general quest for answers and meaning in a world that is kind of promised us meaning through constant flows of information. And it seems the more information that we get, the less we are able to absorb, and it's kind of driving us all crazy. And the character that you play in this film, Ali, he's going through a divorce, which I will say, thankfully, is not that's one coincidence, or that I'm happy not to share. Um, but he's going through a divorce. He's unable to get unemployment checks; they're just not coming through. He's forced to ultimately move back in with his parents, and that causes all sorts of issues. He's looking back on his life through discovering old photographs and DV tapes and VHS tapes, which are from your life, which is pretty amazing how well chronicled this is. And this idea of nostalgia and wistfulness in contrast to the horrible modern day circumstances, but ultimately him trying to figure out, is there a way to get that back? And that is the journey of this film. And it's quite beautiful. So if you could start off by talking about a short that you did that we talked about a few years ago called 311, which
Mm.
was another pandemic set short, but it was created during the COVID-19 pandemic. This, I imagine, was created with some degree of hindsight. I mean, it came out, I think, last year was when you first were talking about it. So tell me about the evolution that you and Charles kind of the journey you went through in bringing that short and expanding on those themes to create this movie, or is there any connection really at all besides the timing, the era?
So yeah, I mean, 311 was a featurette. It was released in 2020. That we shot it. I think that was done in March at the very beginning of um, I guess at that time it was the coronavirus.
Right.
And and that was non-linear in a sense, and it was kind of very experimental. And And after that was done, I had a few months where I kept thinking about that project, and I was kind of in a circumstance myself, and I think a lot of other people at that time, where we were experiencing that world through kind of like a shutdown phase. So at that time, people forget, right? The when the coronavirus happened, there was things happening, and in terms of like how we process time, in terms of like our interactions with people, and even like government forces where things were actually shut down. Um, so like many other people, I was kind of in the circumstance where I was not taking on any other work, and I was kind of just like focused on what I could do in the most restricted sense, but create another film. And I think it's hard, I gotta recall, but I think in September I started shooting just these fragments of things that I was thinking about in terms of story, based off of that. So say take this circumstance, but then kind of create a narrative around this more experimental work. And as I started shooting scenes, I reached out to Charles, he's my producing partner, but he also is my co-writer on some projects.
Mhm.
And I showed him some of these clips, and I said, "Hey, do you want to work on this film? Do you think you want to come in and kind of help shape the narrative with me on this?" And he was all in on it. And so we started crafting that during the film came out last year, but actually principal photography started in maybe September or October 2020.
Okay.
And I and then we I ended up shooting it for another year or a year and a half afterwards. So it was intermittent, as is the narrative itself. Spans a certain amount of time. So I thought, might as well create the structure, the methodology of the film, as the film itself, kind of like, and that's kind of how it came about.
As far as, and I know you've worked with Charles before, but I mean, this movie in particular feels so personal to you. Is it that you kind of wrote the Ali stuff and then he kind of helped fill in the world, or did he bring sort of his perspective of what he was going through, during lockdown? I know you guys are friends and kind of creative partners, so maybe you were talking regularly about this, experiencing kind of the same things. But how did his perspective work its way into the story of a character that, from the audience's point of view, might as well be you because you're also starring in it?
Right. So it's funny. I mean, if you take a look at m- my body of work, and I think people often say this, is that they think it's autobiographical. And there is some sense that, of course, I share certain feelings or circumstances with these characters, but um, ultimately they are kind of removed from how I am as a person. And so I'm filtering this through the experience of like people that I've known growing up, little piece of me in there, and then all these other shared experiences is kind of compressing it into this character. Now, Charles, so what I'm really good at is the conceptual stuff, kind of this framework of how I see the visuals playing out, how a character gets into this space, how to go about the micro, the aesthetics of the kind of the details here. Charles is very good at taking those concepts and kind of putting it into a narrative framework. Now, especially when we work together, because that brings some of my ideas into a space where it's um, more palpable for, I guess, an audience to kind of follow along the story arc of this. And so I would come up with these ideas, send it to him. He would kind of look at these ideas and then, add his own flavor into it, because we had kind of share a similar backstory in terms of like growing up, different areas, but it's, again, the themes are very universal. So uh, we try to take, what we both do best and kind of put it into this piece together.
Okay, so like I'm thinking that's it's amazing to me because watching the movie, aside from there are story beats and kind of there is an arc for your character, but there's nothing about the dialogue or the writing that feels particularly writerly or in its performance actorly.
Hmm.
So towards the end of the film, there's a very important discussion between your character and your character's father, which that's your actual father.
That is my father, yes.
Okay. First of all, um, great actor. I don't know how if he was trained or if it's just like, "Hey, dad, be yourself and say these lines over here," or what. But that interaction felt so natural and
Hmm.
it felt so drawn from a real life experience that it was hard for me to imagine someone else having input in that. And also that it wasn't just, "Hey, we're going to set this camera up and we're going to have a conversation about something that happened to us in real life in the past. We're going to incorporate that into the fabric of this story because it was so real."
Right. So interesting that you say that. My relationship with my father is very, very different than this. It is his performance. Now, how we go about that is that, and this is not the first time my father has been in one of my works. So
He was in 311, right?
he was in
Yeah, yeah.
311. Yeah, he had a little role in there. He's had a little role in several works. So I'm trying to recall how we went about that. So basically, w- there is story beats that we wrote into that piece. Now, into our dialogue, into our conversations. Those story beats were kind of the fabric of the writing for that scene. So it's not dialogue by dialogue. Generally, if I work with non-actors, I'm from the tradition of not being overtly writing in terms of dialogue. That's not the type of cinema that I enjoy.
Mhm.
That's not the type of cinema I enjoy making. I like the presence and natural feel of things happening in the moment, and I wouldn't say naturalistic, but more on the realism side. Um, so we have story beats that we have to hit, and that's basically where the writing comes into it. Um, and then it's a practice of performance and improvising, and then getting onto those beats. Like,
So what was that? I mean, the filming of that conversation, was that a long process? Were there a lot of takes? Because I wasn't so much paying attention to the editing of it, so I can't tell if there was cuts after. I can't recall if there were cuts after every line, but it felt pretty contained within that scene. Was there a lot of work to get to that, or was that take 500 and you finally nailed it?
I I I believe that is the single take or take number 2, that is printed on film. We had rehearsed, so the process is of a rehearsal where we go through that. We kind of do a soft rehearsal where we're hitting beats, we're hitting certain things that we have to do for essentially the story aspect of it, right? Um, and then outside of that, I think we set up the 2 cameras, um, and, hit it. So, uh, and, we have a feel for that, like, when we because of the rehearsal, because we've done this before. I'm very confident in using him because he's a natural on camera, and he's kind of a popular figure now. He has his own YouTube channel that's pretty successful, for cooking.
Well, send me that. I'll link it down below
Oh, for
because I
sure.
gotta check that out.
Yeah, it's I got the mug. It's Cooking with Yusuf.
Oh my gosh.
So, um, so he's good with that kind of stuff.
Now,
But again, that's not his personality. Like that's not his personality. That's not my relationship with him. It's very different. That's an archetype relationship the idea that I took and implanted in this film because it's a very universal type of archetype, that kind of relationship, especially with Middle Eastern families.
not to get too into it, and don't share any details out of school,
Mm.
but like when you say that's not his personality, I mean, he's a pretty chill, loving, but conflicted father because
Mhm.
there's a lot in that conversation about the fashion in which Ali was raised that
Right.
sparks a lot of great ideas and conversation. I feel like so if that's not him, are you saying that he's an overbearing like rage-fueled beast or?
No, I think he's much warmer than he comes across in the there is a distance in our relationship in the film that
Okay.
is there. And that distance is not the same as in real life.
You know, it's interesting you say that because I felt a warmth there that manifested as concern, but I think what I might have been picking
Yes.
up on is there's a scene where your character's mother and father are alone in bed at night, just talking in the darkness about how to handle their son who's moved back in and is now kind of causing trouble. And that, now that you mention this, has more affection and concern in it
Mm,
than he expressed when actually confronting his son. There was a
right,
bit of that removed there. Like he
right.
wasn't prepared to show his vulnerability in that way.
Yes, correct, exactly.
Yeah. Um, I I'm hung up on this acting thing because there's an earlier scene where your character is lying on a bed having a conversation with your ex,
Mm,
and it's not going well. But again, the cadence of that conversation is so naturalistic. I wondered, was that two-way conversation written, or is that you ad-libbing into a phone an unpleasant conversation? Because it felt like you were reacting to actual upsetting
mm.
words coming out of your ex's mouth, but it's not one of those movies where we hear what she's saying. It's all from your point of view.
Right, I think that's a that would be a trade secret, Ian. Um,
Oh, all
um,
right.
no, 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 there is, yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna get into the specifics on that one because
Was that
it'll,
an actual breakup call? Is that what you're trying to tell me? Let's move
no,
on. No.
yeah, mm, but again, that's another, like, running through rehearsals, trying to get it right, and then running single takes on it. And I think that's kind of very important for this type of film. If you see that there isn't not overt cutting, um, I do like this. I do like the single takes. I do like the authenticity of that single take being the performance.
Yeah. Um, as far as like shooting the film, there's a lot of, I assume they're drone shots, right?
Mm,
A lot of really nice kind of flyovers, and it is a reminder of just how kind of dead things were. I mean, this movie takes place right off the bat. It says 6 months into
mm,
the coronavirus pandemic, and we're half a decade removed now.
mm,
And one of the things that I think someone's going to reconcile in film or story someday is that, like you were talking about at the beginning of this, there is all this information and speculation and misinformation and confusion to the point where there is that phrase that popped up, the new normal. The idea that maybe we're just going to have to get used to this. Everyone's going to be in masks and jabbed up for decades to come for the
mm,
rest of our lives. And now that we're on the other side of it, yes, there are some of those lingering conversations and things like that. But when you think back about it and you watch something that is of its time, it's a stark reminder of how barren everything was.
mm,
I mean, there's a scene of you walking outside. I think you were coming from the unemployment office or some kind of a building. You had the mask on, and it's kind of jarring because in the rest of the film you're kind of isolated, either with your parents or by yourself, so you're not kind of wearing it.
Mm.
So was it? You said you filmed a lot of this kind of contemporaneously to when that was all going on, but because you filmed it over a certain amount of time, did those changing kind of attitudes and social norms inform how you told the story, what kind of story you were telling, or how you made the movie?
Yeah, I think there was an evolution in terms of that, but I I think because it didn't linger that much longer, and I think the whole story arc is like the time frame of the film isn't within a year or so. It's not explicit, but it's about that time. I think most of that feeling was still from that time period with a little bit of the easing of that as well. Because even up until the year, we were still kind of compressed into the world of the coronavirus. And then, as the years went along, like 2, 3 years, it's kind of a distant memory at this time. But um, so most of that was informed from that kind of period, and also what everybody. So the impetus of this was really, w- and we're talking about character again, and I'm going back. Um, so I had started working and writing, thinking about this when I saw kind of the disintegration of people around me. There was lots of people moving out of LA, for example. A lot of my friends who were in relationships somehow had a breakup or divorce happening during this time period. So that informed a lot of the not just of writing, but how I felt about this period of time, like how I felt these people were trying to navigate, as myself as well, navigate this period, and how to best capture this kind of the nuanced feeling of this. And I thought, yeah, and this is the kind of the way that I think about every work that I do is like it's very specific, but is this going to last? Are people going to be able to relate to this later? And if that's a yes, then it's very important for me to pursue that. And I thought that because this is kind of a universal feeling, especially now, as is the last few works that I did. Man was kind of similar. It was like a technological isolation happening. And so kind of that's I don't know, this is kind of a tangent here, but
Oh,
that's kind of mm, that to me kind of was like the real through line here. Like, our people are going through this. There is a coronavirus thing happening, but also there's other societal things happening that are bigger than just this, and they are going to last through. And what is a way that we might be able to reconcile some of this if possible?
well, it's funny, not funny, but a coincidence that this week I finished reading Mary Shelley's Frankenstein in preparation for watching and talking about the new Guillermo del Toro movie. And one of the themes that I picked up on that book was the main character's sense of obsession leading to isolation. And ultimately, and this is different than any of the film interpretations have really tackled that story, but Victor Frankenstein, through all of his dissension and descending into madness and revenge and pursuing this godlike power, he's got a supportive family that is constantly trying to reach out and pull him back and say,
Mhm.
no, isolation is not the key. You need to come back and connect. And I was thinking about that while watching Young Ali, because that's the sort of the through line is he is isolated, even though he moves back in with his parents. He is by himself a lot of the time. When he does see them, he's kind of lashing out, thus with this kind of self-imposed exile among people, which is very strange. Well, I shouldn't say strange. It's not it's not the way you're supposed to treat people. And I think he
Mhm.
recognizes that, but he feels helpless to do anything about it. But he's also listening to a lot of podcasts. He's seeking advice from podcasters, from like manifestation gurus, like trying to find all of this information online and having these sort of one-way conversations with people he'll never meet but on the other hand, unable to really open up or communicate with the
Mm.
people that are actually in his life. There's this character, Mikey. There's a few phone calls back and forth, and Ali isn't really able to share with one of his childhood friends what's really going on. And Mikey at one point says, "Man, you're living the dream. You know, you're single, you're not kind of attached, you don't have," because Mikey's got like a young family and everything. So it's that sort of jealousy, but he doesn't know the kind of depths of despair that Ali is experiencing. And not to give too much away, but there is a resolution to this film that is hopeful, and it does go back to that sense of connection. I think you're talking about, will people resonate with this material, in the future? I think that's something that is going to resonate. I mean, Mary Shelley was writing about it 200 years ago. In our current socio-political climate, we're not drawing more together. We are becoming more and more divided and into our own bubbles and all that stuff. So I think a movie like this that says we have the answer at our disposal. In fact, it's a very old answer. And sometimes we see it in videotapes or old photographs of when we were happy and idealistic and hanging out with our friends and building community. We just need to get back to that.
Mm. Yeah.
So I'm reviewing the movie while talking to you, which is again very unprofessional, but I just love it so much. So another thing that I was reminded of, and I want to ask you about this. Did you ever see that movie Amy, about Amy Winehouse? It was the
Mm,
documentary about her life that was
no, I
completely
don't
told
think
through.
so.
I really recommend it
Mm.
because it was a documentary. It's talking heads, but you never see them. You just hear the voiceover, but it's the story of her life told through exclusively photographs and home movies and
Mm.
performances and stuff. That just kind of shows what a person who comes of age and unfortunately dies in the era of constant, omnipotent or omnipresent media, what that can do. Your life seems to have been pretty well documented, as evidenced by the home movies, the photographs. I mean, I know you're a filmmaker and you've probably had those desires for a long time, but just that your family and your friends documented everything to that degree, that seems unusual. Is that unusual?
Um, I don't know. I think this is kind of like a retro causation thing where, somehow uh I always when I find like these types of source material, I'm like, these were planted. Like I'm using this now, but it was planted before for this use now. And I'm not sure. Like I did have a lot of footage, and I've used this is a thing that I've been using quite a bit. It was a lot in used in Three Worlds as well, home videos. Um, but it's the irony is that I think I have I have no pictures of high school. I have like three pictures. I think they're in the movie too. Um, yeah, when did I Yeah, I think I got like a high 8 in, my l late teens or early 20s, and I was filming a lot, and that's kind of when I started wanting to really document and be a filmmaker. It's also why like, have a tendency towards the realism where I love material that is like this, that is kind of viscerally and texturally real. And so like high 8, VHS, all those kind of medias that, Super 8, those really fascinated me because they have a certain character and feeling about them that we don't really I mean, we see it nowadays, but it's very different than the pristine stuff that you see in you go watch a movie in the movie theaters.
Oh yeah. It was nice to see some like actual photographs, like in an album, not just video. It made me nostalgic. Um, oh, I totally lost my train of thought just now. Oh, I remember what I was going to say. Politics.
Mm.
There is, I almost breathed a sigh of relief because there is a scene where Ali is talking to someone. Again, I'm going to try and tiptoe around this because I don't want to give away every scene in the movie or the major themes. But he's talking to someone that he's just met, and the topic of politics comes up, and he kind of shuts it down right away. And that felt almost like a meta statement, like, yes, this is a movie about the pandemic, but we're not going to go there. We want
Mm.
to talk about just a regular human experience, and maybe the regular human experience is not terminally online. Can you talk a bit about that decision and why even include that in the movie if you weren't trying to say something about it? Maybe you were.
I definitely was trying to keep so I, there's a line here that that I had to be careful of, as well as Charles, is that the pandemic was an extremely politicized event,
Yeah.
um, as is everything now. But um, the experience that people go through when you remove and again, a lot of this movie is about identity as well, and how that shapes us into doing certain things. Removing the political identity kind of frees the film into the focus into what it should be about and away from what it should not be about. So in this character, especially this character trying to go through a transformation, I think one of the first things, and I had to go into like kind of researching this stuff because it was not something that I was completely familiar with, and treating it in a way where um, treating it in a way where there is respect towards that and respect for how people take this information in. You're talking about the manifestation stuff or whatever. You can view it in many different ways. And one frame is that these are all scammers or whatever. Or another frame is like, this is life changing and I need to take it. I don't want, I, as the filmmaker, I did not want to make those decisions for the viewer, as I did not want to make the decision about the politics for the viewer. So I wanted to remove that and kind of strip it from that. And that was one of the ways to do it on that particular scene.
Yeah, I think it was extremely well done because, again, not to give too much away, but when your character does try and shut down the political argument, there's a bit of, from what I can sense, a struggle to like, no, we need to engage. I need to
Mm.
know how you feel about this issue or that issue or whatever. And you're very polite and cordial. And that almost seems like a key to getting back to that civility and that sense of community that's been lost. Because I feel like if this had happened in the earlier part of the movie, it might have been more combative and
Mm.
more in that kind of how dare you try and break my bubble with your nonsense kind of
Right.
thing. Because we don't, to be clear, I as a viewer don't know where your character or you as a filmmaker or Charles stands on the left or the right divided of the issue. It's not like you say we're shutting this down because you're a lefty kook or you're a right wing nut job or whatever it is. It is very centrist, but not in a fence sitting way, but in a way that, like, to what you're saying, we can deal with each other as people without having to take sides on 1,000 issues.
Right. I think I I mean, I think in general, for a film like this, like um if the more it's focused into what the thesis is, the through lines are, um I think the better the way that like the better the meditation works. And we're so caught up these days in identity and like the political stuff. I like For me, I just don't want to inject that kind of stuff into this, especially this type of subtle work, because it because it'll immediately like have it'll populate with what ideas people have about everything, about the character, about how so it kind of, to me, it kind of ruins the meditation. And I think of this film as I do my last few works, because this is kind of the mode I'm working in, as a meditative piece, as a piece of meditation. Like, that you watch, um, and if you tune in, it'll work for you and not feel meandering. And if you don't have if you're all over the place, it doesn't work the same way. It does not have that same effect. Now, and it's kind of my stance about the brain rot culture we're in. This kind of short media, short attention span. Um, these are kind of the works that are kind of the complete opposite of that.
I love that you're describing this as a meditation, because there is a scene towards the end of the film where your character is putting stuff in bags. And again, I'm not trying to give away what the significance of that is, but I started because that scene takes its time. It's a very patient scene, and the score is incredible, which, you did the music for the film as well. But it kind of almost put me in a trance and put me into the shoes of your character about what can I unburden of myself. You can tell I'm surrounded by stuff.
Mm.
Is this preventing me spiritually from moving on to something better? And what could I put in my own bags? And I think that was just a great stroke. And I think there's a few of those kind of moments in the movie where on the surface nothing is happening, but thematically there's a lot going on. It's kind of giving the audience almost like a theatrical intermission, where you're not supposed to get up and go, get popcorn or go to the bathroom or something. You're supposed to sit and reflect on what you've watched and get ready for whatever the next step is.
Right, right.
Yeah. I do want to ask, kind of winding down here, there's a moment towards the end of the film where a character hugs another character, and there's a running of the hands through hair. And it's a sign of affection that we don't really see in movies, but I see it all the time in my own family, in the way other kind of in families some kind of deal with each other. It's a very kind of intimate, parental gesture. Was that something that came out? Was that, again, something that was scripted? Is that just kind of a natural moment of, you've seen this in your own life, so you wanted to put it in, or what? Because it cemented the fact that this movie is very specific and not cliched or generalized for kind of
Mhm.
just relying on things that people have seen 1,000 times on movies, not necessarily in their real life.
Yeah, I think that goes back to I'm not sure about if it was scripted that way. I can't recall exactly. Probably not, because the way that we wrote the script was sequence to sequence to sequence. It's not like a linear script. It's like these are the ideas that are going to work in this picture, and then this, when we had the scene, the fabric of the scene, I think it was just about performance at that point. Performance in the most specific way possible. So for me, it's and for everything in this film, like there is a generalized idea of what I want the feeling to be, or express the thought about what's going on. And then I want the specifics. And the specifics are the most important part. I think they translate universally, but the more specific, the way more it gets away from the generic aspects of what a film like an expression like that could be. So, the more specific you get, the more visceral you get, and the more people, that would watch it have like a reaction to it that feels familiar to them, and not familiar in a sense that they've seen this in a movie, familiar that they've experienced this in their life. For me, that's a very important thing.
Or just because it's such a specific act of intimacy that, people probably don't do it all the time, but it might be a lightning bolt of a remembrance of, like, oh, I remember, yeah, I rubbed my fingers through my son's hair or something
Mhm,
when he was like a little kid, because he did
mhm.
something, I was proud of him, or I just felt like a lot of love and affection. Yeah, there's a lot of that kind of going through here, a lot of nostalgia and what it can teach us about how to move forward instead of trapping us in the past. And I think that's the big power of this film. So I gotta ask. I know you're working on something now. It's early days, but what can you tell us about your next project, if anything, or do you want to just keep it under wraps till it's done?
It's probably going to be under wraps. This is kind of it's not a sequel, but it's somehow birthed from a short film I did in 2011, um, and it's of a tradition that's not very popular these days in terms of what the film, like the actual construction of the film is. But and it will take a bit of time for me to get all the components together necessary, but the work has started.
Okay. Well, I'm kind of sad that I asked, but now I really want to know what the hell this is. But as far as Young Ali, where can people like see it? I mean, is it on demand or
Yeah, Young Ali's had a weird kind of um, uh, trajection in terms of distribution, some good starts and stops. Right now, the best place to watch it, and I say this with my other work as well, is a platform called Relay that just launched, and it has about four other films of mine, or three or four other films of mine. Um, so I could provide that link.
yeah.
They have a week free trial, and that's probably the best place. I think they have the best split and the best deal right now for filmmakers, and it's on other platforms as well. But I'd like to just focus it there right now.
So is it just like you kind of like you go rent or buy the typical kind of deal? It's just a new platform for
Yeah,
that
well, it's a
showcase your work.
subscription base, but they give like a
Oh,
free week or a month or something. And it has a lot of independent films. Um, And then there's a Taiwanese site called Jilu that it's on, that is in all territories right now. And then, if you have a library card, it's at Biblio Plus, so I think
oh,
you can rent it out at not all counties have that, but, it's available there as well, and some other platforms like that.
okay. Well, we'll definitely have the relay link below.
Mm.
I'm sorry. One last thing I
Yeah,
thought to ask
absolutely.
you, because this is like the main publicity kind of image for this film is you in the shower, right? Um, I've ne- I've never seen someone take a shower like that before, where you're kind of huddled by the faucet down by the basin. The shower isn't even on, but you're like splashing, you're cupping and splashing. What is that from?
So those are elements that's from my own that's some habit I've had personally. And I remember when we were doing dailies, you showed it a couple other people, they're like, "What the fuck is that?" What is and and I thought, wow, that's such specific thing to this character. And like no one else is gonna be doing that. It's so weird. But to me, for the character, it was like a very comforting thing, as it was for me. So like that's something that I would do as well. So when you were talking about where there is the performance aspect, where there's a mirror, that's kind of where those intersections happen.
Well, I don't want to get too, armchair psychologist on it for that character, but I could almost see it as a way of this guy is so low in his life, he can't even stand up to wash
Yeah.
himself.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right. Well, Amir, thank you very much for, again, your patience, for sharing this movie. An amazing film, and I highly recommend people go check it out. And I look forward to the next project with great interest, not only because I'm sure it's going to be another phenomenal work, but also I'm deadly curious about what what this is an expansion of, what this kind of
Mm.
genre is. You say that isn't really done anymore. It's a big mystery, and I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, every time I start a new project, I really kind of think from beginner's mind, and I like to do everything in a way where I feel like the process always feels new and fresh. And so this, to me, this new project just kind of feels very much like that.
Excellent. All right, Amir, what aside from Relay, where else can people find you? Where can I direct them to you via links?
So, my website, amirmotlagh.com. Yeah, if you're on Tubi, I have some films there. Apple TV, I have some films there, or whatever, iTunes, and Amazon, all the other platforms in general. Not all my works are everywhere. Pick Relay is the best. You can find my Instagram at amirmotlagh.studio. YouTube is Amir Motlagh, and also Cooking with Youssef on every platform. Instagram, I think he's got about almost 100. He's going to break 100K followers there.
Wow.
YouTube and everywhere. He's a great actor, but he's a phenomenal cook. And yeah, that's our little project together.
Are you filming those? Is that the deal?
I'm I don't film all of them. Sometimes we have somebody else come in, but it is our project together. So we sit down once a week and go through what's coming up next and kind of the schedule and all that, the cadence of the releases.
That is beautiful, man. Well, yeah, I'll link that below as well. Amir Motlagh, thank you again. Folks out there, be sure and check out his work. You will not regret it. In fact, I dare say you will be enriched, and that's 100% guarantee on my part. Whatever that means, if you're not satisfied, I can't give you anything back. So I'm just saying it, really. But do it. And if you like this show, please like, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, all that business. And until next time, whenever that is, whatever that is, thank you very much and take care. Hey everyone, Ian here. I know, long time no see. But if you like the video you just watched, feel free to subscribe to Kicking the Seat right here, and also check out the playlist and recommended video right here. Thanks for watching.